This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, this is Alan Schimmel, founder, editor-in-chief, CEO of MediaOps, and you're listening or watching the very first This Week at MediaOps. This Week at MediaOps is shot here at our world headquarters in beautiful Boca Raton, Florida, and it's meant to give you a look at the past week at the various MediaOps brands, what's been news, what's the big stories, and to keep you abreast of the latest information in the tech world, including DevOps, DevSecOps, CyberSec, containers, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, next-gen infrastructure, CI, CD, and more. If you're interested in technology or you work in IT, This Week at MediaOps is going to be a great resource for you. So, we'd like to get started. Well, we should get started with kind of introducing MediaOps, and as you can see now in the background as it changes behind me, MediaOps and some of our brands. MediaOps, we are the people behind DevOps.com, Container Journal, Security Boulevard, DevOps Chat Podcast, DevOps TV on YouTube, Digital Anarchist, our very own video platform, which hopefully you're watching this show on. We also are one of the principals behind the DevOps Institute, the leading provider of DevOps training and community in the world. In addition to that, MediaOps is really ingrained into the IT tech scene, and in doing so, we want to try to keep you abreast and make you involved in the latest in tech. Anyway, my format for these shows is that I think each week we're going to dive into what I think are the top news stories and trends that you need to be aware of coming out of each of our major properties. So let's start now with DevOps.com. So this past week in DevOps.com, we saw some really big news coming out. We also had some great how-to articles. And you know, in DevOps, it's still evolving, it's still maturing. There's still a lot of people who are really thirsting for DevOps how-tos and informations and so forth. And I wanted to highlight a couple of these that just in the last week or 10 days have been up on DevOps.com. So the first one I wanted to talk about was 5 practices that will help drive successful robotic process automation deployments. This article was written by well-known tech journalist George Hume. George was one of our founding writers and editors, has been with us for almost 5 years now. But George had taken a bit of a hiatus as he was launching his own project, and he's returned now to help us cover what we call the leadership sweep here at DevOps.com. In this article, George gives us 5 practices that will drive successful robotic process automation deployments. Now, what is a robotic process automation deployment, you ask? Well, it's one of the critical technologies that enterprises are leveraging to automate their business processes, to make their businesses more agile and efficient. So it's not about having Robbie the robot walking around your manufacturing plant or your office. It's very specific, right? Robotic process automation. It's about automating things like release and deployments and so forth. So when properly deployed and managed, according to George, RPAs can automate everything from mundane tasks such as organizing files to many more significant functions such as user provisioning and resources, and even more than that. You should check out this article. You can find it on DevOps.com. It'll be in our show notes. And George has 5 tips. These tips are really aimed at managers and executives looking to deploy RPAs in their organization. So great article. Check that one out. And thanks to George, and keep up. It's great to have you back, George. Next article is another. 5 was a popular number, it seems, this week on DevOps.com. And in this article, Ellie Martin of the Startup Change Groups has given us 5 core principles of lean management. And if you didn't know, really so much of DevOps comes from lean IT, lean manufacturing, lean management, the whole lean sort of process. So again, in this article, 5 Core Principles of Lean Management, we're really aiming at managers and the leadership suite here, and this is aimed at managers who are seeking to implement lean project management. The 5 tips from Ellie are solid advice for any managers looking to do better with lean. I could go through all 5 of them here with you, but then you wouldn't read the article. So go check it out. Jot down those 5. They're really just solid block and tackling kind of tips if lean project management is something you're really interested in. The next article up at DevOps.com that I wanted to highlight was a bit of an announcement. We have our very first DevOps Connect DevSecOps Days virtual summit coming up just in about 2 weeks, April 2nd. Now, what we've tried to do here is, for the last 5 years at RSA Conference, on the Monday of RSA week, partnering with the RSA Conference folks, we have put on a DevSecOps event. Even before it was called DevSecOps, it was DevOps Connect, and for a while it was Rugged DevOps, or, DevOps and Security, and we settled on DevSecOps now for about the last 3 years. But in any event, this has become the DevSecOps event in the RSA week for the security and DevOps crowd. This past year, we had over 1,000 people, plus a little over 1,000 people, come visit with us that day. And we had a full day of some fantastic sessions with some of the biggest names in the DevSecOps field. People like John Willis, Shannon Leitz, who started DevSecOps.org, James Wickett, who partners now with Shannon on DevSecOps.org, but also is the founder of the Rugged DevOps movement. Of course, John is the co-author of DevOps Handbook and many more books, and one of the kind of leading lights in the DevOps world. John, Shannon, and James, by the way, are working on, and along with others, are working on a new book, the DevSecOps Handbook, which is going to be out probably in the next 6 months or so, I think. In addition to those folks, though, we were really lucky to have great people from Target, Nike. Courtney Kistler from Nike, formerly of Nordstrom, was there. Comcast, Larry Marchioni from Comcast, gave an amazing talk really showing how Comcast is utilizing DevSecOps. DJ Schleen from Aetna, which is now CVS, so CVS Aetna, DJ is there. We had speakers from around the world, and it was just an amazing day of DevOps learning. I realize not everyone gets out to San Francisco for RSA, though. So what we've done, as in years past, we have videotaped these sessions in their entirety with the speakers, with their slides, and we're going to be running a free virtual event on April 2nd. You can register online. You don't have to get on a plane. You don't have to pay for any crazy San Francisco hotel rates at $600-700 a night. And best of all, you don't have to put up with the crazy homeless people on the streets of San Francisco, which is a whole nother story we'll talk about in a second. But anyway, come April 2nd, you can log in. All of the sessions from DevSecOps Days, DevOps Connected RSA will be in the virtual summit. And because it's truly a virtual summit, you'll also be able to interact with other attendees. There'll be a full exhibit space with all of the sponsors from DevSecOps Days, DevOps Connect, at RSA, at the virtual summit. You'll be able to download swag. You'll be able to download a bunch of collateral, videos. You'll be able to speak with some of the vendors and sponsors, as well as some of the speakers as well. So check that out. It's DevOpsConnect.com. You can probably get to it off of there. You can also get to it on DevOps.com. We'll be sending the links out with the show notes here. And look, we'd love to have you come join us and check out some of the great DevOps learning that is going to take place. That's April 2nd, and it's basically all day. I think it's around 10 to 4 East Coast time. Or maybe it's 9 to 4 East Coast time. In addition to that, though, I did mention RSA in San Francisco. This year's RSA conference was in many ways better than ever. Our DevSecOps event was was, I thought, the very best we've done. In addition to that, I spent most of my week at our Digital Anarchist booth in Moscone West, where we did almost 70 video interviews, and you can check those out on Digital Anarchist as well. But a consistent theme that I heard from a lot of my friends and attendees at RSA is it's getting really hard to walk in the streets of San Francisco around the Moscone Center. The homeless folks, and it's not just that they're homeless. There's no sin in being poor or homeless. It's the sin is on us as a country in some respects for not doing more. But so many of these people seem to have real mental issues and problems. You know, they're not wearing clothes, and it's cold out there, and defecating on the streets and stuff like that, and just harassing passerbys. It really takes away from what is otherwise a fantastic experience at RSA. I know RSA has been in San Francisco forever, and it's really entwined into it. But I'm getting to the point where if San Francisco can't do something to make it a better experience for the visitors to their city coming in for this event, as well as other events. I mean, the Moscone Center is a leading destination. I think you're going to start seeing San Francisco losing a lot of business as a result, at least in conferences anyway. So, I hear you, my fellow RSA attendees, as well as anyone, whether it be the Salesforce or Oracle or IBM Think or any other, major event you're attending in San Francisco. The city has to do a better job of making it safer and a better experience for attendees. Other than that, though, RSA is next February there. We're really looking forward to it. We're also going to be at RSA Singapore, APJ, July 15th through the 18th. And we'll be putting a DevSecOps Days on there. Stay tuned for information. We're looking for speakers, sponsors. And if you're going to be going to RSA, or if you're in the Singapore AP region, it's a great event. Check that out. By the way, you don't see many homeless people walking around in Singapore. It's a lovely, lovely city, and if you haven't been there, I really recommend it. Let's get back to DevOps.com, though. And I wanted to talk a little bit about another article on DevOps.com, and this one is called Query Your Network Like a Database. Now, we talk about networks. That really isn't often talked about with DevOps. DevOps is about application development, deployment, integration. But you know what? Networks are an important, without the network, you still can't use your apps and everything else. So in this article by David Erickson, who's a co-founder and CEO at Forward Networks, and by the way, David has he's a PhD, has a tremendous background in SDN and so forth, and really is a networking ninja. David talks about that we should stop looking at individual devices on our network one at a time. We need to think of our network and all the devices on it like a database. And David, strongly recommends that we can query our network like a database using the GraphQL language. Now, as I mentioned, we don't often think of networks when we're thinking about DevOps, but maybe it's time we do. And the network at this point may be one of the most overlooked parts of our DevOps software factory, pipeline delivery, and software development lifecycle. So check out that article by David. I thought they did a great job on it. Okay, now let me come to our last story that I wanted to do a highlight for you about DevOps on DevOps.com this past week, and that is big news coming out of the Linux Foundation. Now, for those who aren't aware, the Linux Foundation's been around a long time now, and they really have done a great job of managing and fostering and nourishing many of the greatest open source projects that we are seeing today in the DevOps and cloud and IT space in general, right? Probably best known these days for the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, CNCF, which is where Kubernetes and a bunch of other projects have incubated, if you will. Many of them have graduated now. But, the Linux Foundation has done a great job. CNCFCon, KubeCon is just a rock star of an event. The next one in Europe will be coming up in Barcelona in May. will be there doing video interviews. If you're out in Barcelona for KubeCon, we'll probably be back in, I think it's San Diego next year in the U.S., and they have one in the summer in Shanghai as well. But they launched a new foundation, and it's called the CD Foundation. It's for continuous delivery, continuous deployment. And what was really cool about it is they were able to line up some of the biggest CI/CD tools or projects out there and get the companies who are helping to manage them or fostering them to donate these projects to this new CD Foundation, where the CD Foundation will foster them, nourish them, and hopefully see them graduate. So 4 initial projects were given over to the CD Foundation. Jenkins, which is still the largest CI project or tool in use. Jenkins X, which is really for the Kubernetes kind of deployments, Jenkins for Kubernetes, as well as Tecton from Google Cloud, and Spinnaker from the folks over at Netflix, one of the, I don't want to say grand old daddies, but one of the more well-known open source projects around CD. This really gives this new CD Foundation a solid group of projects to manage and help really kind of expand the CD space in general. Some of the there was something like 25 founding members of this new CD Foundation. Among them, Alibaba, Ancore, Capital One, Circle CI, CloudBees, Deploy Hub, GitLab, JFrog, Red Hat, Google, Netflix, and more. I mean, this seems to me like a foundation poised for great things, and we're going to see great things from it. It's set up as a sister organization, so a peer of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. So, and I think at Barcelona in May, the CD Foundation will sort of have its coming out party at CNCF-Con and KubeCon. So stay tuned for big things on that. I think, this CD Foundation is going to be a mover and a shaker. Check out Mike Vizard's article on it on DevOps.com. And also, if you're interested in finding out more, I did a very nice podcast with Kosuke Kasawagi, KK, the CTO of CloudBees and founder of Jenkins, as well as Tracy Miranda, CloudBees open source community liaison. And we did a nice little podcast talking about CD Foundation, why CloudBees is excited about it, what made them give over Jenkins and Jenkins X to the CD Foundation. It's a great conversation. You should check that out. And you can get to that on DevOps.com as well. And again, all of these links will be in our show notes. So it was a pretty busy week in DevOps.com and DevOps News. As I say, check out the site. If you want to stay up to date, you may not be able to catch our show every week, and our show's only going to do summary highlights. There's so much more going on at DevOps.com. You really should subscribe to our newsletter. You can get to that right on the front page. You can check out, This Week at MediaOps to stay up. And, the DevOps scene is just too dynamic not to use DevOps.com to stay on top of it. So before we go on to our next section, though, I wanted to just pause right here so we have a quick word from our sponsors.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
Schimmel back here for This Week at MediaOps. So moving from DevOps over to one of our other sites, Security Boulevard. Before I get into the top news, some of you may not be aware of Security Boulevard or familiar. Security Boulevard's only about a year and a half old, but really Security Boulevard's the home of the Security Bloggers Network, and that's closer to 15 years old. And it is an interesting story about how that came to be. The Security Bloggers Network's made up of about 350, give or take, blogs from the biggest names in security to some really just singular researchers who are the folks really doing research on vulnerabilities and backdoors and the dark web and so forth. And what's great about it is all of that content is aggregated into one Bloggers Network feed. We've never added a blog that didn't ask us to be added to this blog. So it's really grown organically over the last 15 years until today. Reading from just the feed itself is almost like drinking from a fire hose. One of the great things we do with Security Boulevard is we then kind of try to moderate the feed and put the articles into buckets so that if you want to read about endpoint security or cloud security or DevSecOps or what have you, the articles are dumped into these buckets and you can kind of read it without drinking from the fire hose. Curated, if you will. So Security Boulevard curates the Security Bloggers feed. And then on top of that, we have hired some of the greatest writers in the security space to write original content for the Boulevard. And you'll find that that's a great resource as well. But I wanted to just quickly tell you the story about how the Security Bloggers Network came to be. So I had a good friend named Brad Feld. Brad's probably one of the better known VCs in the business today. And I've known Brad for 20 plus years. I sold a company to him many years ago, and many of the companies that I've helped co-found and work for over the years have actually been financed by Brad, whether it be through SoftBank Venture Capital, Mobius Venture Capital, or Foundry Group. He's also one of the co-founders of Techstars. About 15 or so years ago, Brad came to me and introduced me to a fellow named Dick Costello, who at the time was the CEO of a company called FeedBurner. And FeedBurner was a company that was making all of our RSS feeds standardized. At the time, RSS was sort of a Tower of Babel with so many different formats, they didn't always play nicely. So FeedBurner was, just making all of your RSS feeds standardized so you could use one RSS reader to read all of them. Of course, how was FeedBurner going to make money? Well, Dick came up with the idea of pulling together blogs on a like subject that he would then be able to sell advertising into the RSS feed for. And so Brad had put together a venture capital bloggers network, because at the time VCs were all blogging. They still do today. And Dick and Brad asked me to do the same for InfoSec, for security. And I put it together. I went out to some friends. I asked them if they'd help. And that's how the Security Bloggers Network was born, as I said, about 15 years ago. Well, an interesting thing happened. Within about 4 or 5 months after that, Dick and the founders and the folks at FeedBurner sold FeedBurner to Google for a pretty handsome sum. I think it was $80 or $100 million, which may not sound like a lot, but when you consider FeedBurner had no revenue at the time, I thought it was a great deal. Dick, of course, went on to be the CEO of Twitter and a bunch of other stuff. He's had an amazing career. But the Security Bloggers Network went to Google. About 6 months after that, Google came to me and said, "We don't know what to do with this. They tell us you started it. Would you take it back?" So I took it back, and that was probably 14 years ago. And I've been running the Bloggers Network and the feed ever since. It probably manifests itself most at RSA every year, where we do our bloggers meetup and awards, and it's a great event with some great folks, and love seeing all my security blogger friends, even some of them who maybe don't blog as much as they used to. But the Bloggers Network has lived on and continued to grow and thrive, and it was always my intention to put a site around it, and that's really what Security Boulevard is. So in a lot of ways, Security Boulevard is a recognition of a dream or a plan I had 14 years ago, and I'm happy to see it thriving and really becoming a resource for the security community today. So that being said, though, let's talk about some of the top stories that I found interesting on Security Boulevard today. Two of them come from one of my favorite authors in security, and that's Richie Jennings. Richie has written for, a whole bunch of security and tech-related publications over the years, and he does a great job usually of highlighting some humor as well as highlighting some of the biggest stories in tech. One story he did on Security Boulevard this week was around Citrix System. And supposedly Citrix Systems had been breached by some Iranian-related hacking group. And this breach was going on for about 10 years, and they removed terabytes of data from Citrix, which, in case you don't know, also performs a lot of work for the federal government, DoD, three-letter agencies, and this would be a real problem. The issue, as Richie put it out there, though, is that this claim about the Iranian hack really came out from a very little known security service provider who claims they found the goods on this. And I mean, it was pretty detailed. They did claim it was a brute force attack by an Iranian group called Iridium. But yet, no one is admitting anything here. Citrix isn't admitting it. A lot of other folks aren't admitting it. And because this firm is the firm who's claiming the breach is little known in the industry and not with not a lot of credibility yet, a lot of people are doubting whether it happened. My take on it is usually where there's smoke, there's fire. I think probably something did happen here, and sooner or later someone's going to spill the beans and we'll find out the truth. But anyway, Richie does a really nice job of rounding up what others are saying about it as well, and I recommend, again, it'll be in our show notes. You should check it out. It's a great article. Next article I want to bring to your attention is also a Richie Jennings article, and it talks about ransomware. It's amazing how big a footprint ransomware has taken in this cybersecurity space. But this is another, when I read this article, I thought of my friend Brian Krebs, right? For most of you know Brian Krebs, but Brian was a former writer for the Washington Post covering the cyber scene. And he left there, 5-6 years ago, maybe more now, and started his own Krebs on Security. Brian has broken the biggest stories in security over the last 10 or 15 years, without a doubt. He does amazing work, tracing the dark halls and alleys of the dark web and bringing to light the latest breaches and methods that a lot of our cyber criminals and nation states and so forth are using to do bad stuff. Brian came under attack a few years ago and wound up having to almost go underground a bit. He was the victim of a huge DDoS, probably one of the biggest DDoS attacks ever. But more than just DDoS, there was physical threats and everything else. Well, similar story Richie writes about this week is a ransomware fighter, Fabian Mozar. Fabian is a fellow who has supposedly cracked some of the biggest ransomware malware out there, right? And nothing a ransomware person hates more than to have his ransomware, be vulnerable to cracking, so he can't hold anyone hostage. Well, it seems some of these ransomware authors are a little bit upset with Fabian and have made some threats against him as well, to the point where Fabian had to go into hiding. He thinks it's the Russian mob who's behind it. Who knows? The Russian mob is always sort of a standard boogeyman to use. But Fabian had to move from his home in East Germany, and he's now in an undisclosed location. But like everything else in security and politics and the world we live in today, there's the flat earthers who doubt that Fabian actually has cracked any of this ransomware and he's doing this for publicity and all of that stuff. I don't buy it. I think people don't pick up and move unless they're really afraid. But nevertheless, Richie, again, does a great job of not only giving you his opinion, but grabbing the opinion from around the industry and finding out, what's the real deal there. So check that one out. And we hope Fabian finds peace and security soon. Continuing in the ransomware vein, I wanted to bring out another good article in Security Boulevard. This one was actually from one of the Security Blogger Network members, and that is Alessandro De Pinto, writing for the Nozumi Network blog. And he gave us a whole report on a new ransomware malware called Locker Goga. And evidently, it somehow made its way into the Norwegian aluminum factory for Norsk Hydro, which is a large aluminum production company, manufacturer out in Norway. And this ransomware supposedly ground production to a halt. So when you have a large factory producing aluminum and metals and stuff like this, to bring that factory to a grinding halt gives you an idea of the impact that security and specifically ransomware can bring, and why so many people just pay the money quickly to avoid that kind of thing. In the Locker Goga ransomware, Alessandro and the Nozumi Network folks think they used an active directory kind of vector for a mechanism for spreading the malware. And they've put out a bunch of alerts and notices on how to be careful, how to avoid this, how to know if it's there. You should absolutely check it out. Another article on Security Boulevard is something that we all heard around about. It was, it was a big message at RSA this year, and that is the skills gap and just lack of personnel for our cybersecurity as well as physical security jobs, right? I mean, we've all seen the headlines. There might be 1 million plus jobs open going unfilled in cybersecurity. Well, again, one of our Security Boulevard writing team, Sue Peremba, she gave us a few nice articles live from RSA this year. And, one of the themes, as I mentioned, was this cybersecurity skills gap. And, of course, the biggest theme from RSA this year was zero trust, and we'll talk about that another time. I had enough zero trust to last me for a while. But anyway, the cybersecurity skills gap and talent shortage that goes with it. So the fact is, it's not just that there are enough people, but that these people don't have the security skills we need them to operate in today's environments with our sophisticated tools and everything else. And so what happens is because you can't find people with the skills you need, you wind up hiring, instead of A players, B and C players, hoping you can train them up into A players. And that's great. If you're starting a career in cybersecurity, there's a great opportunity to start with very little experience and kind of be thrown into the deep end of the pool where you'll sink or swim and get those experiences that you need to be better. But for those companies where security is such a mission critical element, finding qualified people to protect us today who aren't learning on the job, this is a real problem. But I got to give you the devil's advocate side of this as well. I have several friends in security who have, ninja-like skills and have not been able to find a job for a few months. And when I ask them why, they say a lot of the jobs they're applying for, they're told they're overqualified, too mundane, of a position for someone with their skill set, etc. So, like everything else, take it with a grain of salt. There may be a lot of jobs out there, they just may not be the job for you. But the skills gap and lack of talent to fill our cybersecurity jobs needs is a real issue that I think we should really have to we're gonna have to deal with as an industry. Last on Security Boulevard, after that heavy kind of depressing, let's turn to a little security humor. And this is literally security humor. So if you go to securityboulevard.com/humor, HUMOR, you'll see a collection it's basically cartoons and other illustrations, because hey man, we all need a little humor in our lives, and security's hard, and sometimes it's almost impossible, and it's nice, to be able to laugh at ourselves, laugh at the situation. So shout out to Mark Handelman. Mark has been a member of the Security Bloggers Network for years and years, and he does great work. His blog is over at infosecurity.us, and as I said, it's been the Security Bloggers Network for years. Mark curates security cartoons from a whole bunch of different sources and puts them up there. Some of them are really funny and witty. Some of them are just, you see yourself in there. Some of them are corny, but it happens. But you can find them in a collection on Security Boulevard under Humor, Security Boulevard/Humor. It's called Security Humor. If you want a little chuckle, check that out, subscribe to it. It's pretty cool, and it's a great job by Mark. Speaking of cartoons and humor, if you get a chance to go over to DevOps.com, we also have the Roll Bobs collection there by my friend Bob Resselman. And Bob does a great job. He's so cynical. He's been around for a while. He's an old-time Unix, Linux guy, and some of his cartoons over on Roll Bob are pretty amazing too. So check out that. Check out Security Humor. You know what? So that was the big news in Security Boulevard this week, coming back from RSA. But again, you can subscribe to the newsletters. You can go to the site. You can check out me at MediaOps. This week at MediaOps, to stay up to date, but there's so much more information there. You really should subscribe. But now let's take a quick break for our sponsors.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, back here to the show. It's This Week at MediaOps. I'm Alan Schimmel, and thanks for sticking in with us this late into the show. I want to wrap things up right now with was kind of the quiet child of the three main sites we have at MediaOps, but lately is really caught on fire. And it's not that the site is so fantastic, it is, but it's also the Kubernetes and Docker and serverless and microservices and all of this cloud native next gen architecture and we live in amazing times if you are a ops, an architect person, or dev, and just in IT. There's so much happening. So Container Journal, if you don't know, is a site that's really all about containers, Docker, Kubernetes, serverless, as I mentioned, and so forth. And as I said, it's really been catching on. I recommend you check it out. Let me give you a couple of what I thought were the big stories this week in Container Journal. First of all, got a great article by Tracy Reagan, who's CEO of Deploy Hub. If you don't know Tracy, if you go to DevOps.com and Container Journal, we've done a bunch of webinars and podcasts with Tracy over the years. She's the CEO founder of Deploy Hub, open source guru. Tracy has a long history in IT and is a really, really smart woman. She wrote this article, and man, if you're interested in Kubernetes and how the whole Kubernetes pipeline is going to change the way we deploy and think about software, check this article out. It went a little viral on Google, so some of you may have seen it already. But Tracy talks to us about Kubernetes pipelines bringing a new world, a new way of doing things. If you know about Kubernetes pipelines, there's plenty in here. Tracy gave you a ton of meat to learn some more. If you don't know about Kubernetes pipelines, Tracy laid it out from a foundational and built it from there all the way up, talking about things like clusters and service mesh. What is service mesh, right? You've heard the name, but do you really understand? Tracy lays it all out there. The bottom line here is Tracy says that this is the future. If you are not going to learn how to develop and deploy using a Kubernetes pipeline with service mesh, you're going to be a dinosaur really quickly. And she's not the only one saying it. If you've been to KubeCon, you know the kind of buzz this thing is generating. So please go check out Kubernetes Pipelines. Hello, New World. It's probably one of the most popular articles of all time that we've run on container journals. And if nothing else, remember Kubernetes Pipeline. Go learn more about it. Next article I wanted to bring to your attention is we celebrating a birthday. Happy birthday. Happy birthday to Docker. 6th birthday for Docker. You know, a lot of people can be up on Docker, down on Docker. Here's the fact. This whole container market, this whole container economy that we're seeing take place before our eyes, grow up before our eyes, is really due to Solomon Hykes and the folks at Docker. Right? Containers have been around for 20, 25 years. But it wasn't until Docker, Solomon, you know, came out with Docker and the Docker team that we really started to see containers take off. So without that vision and the contributions, we wouldn't be talking about containers and Kubernetes and cloud natives and all these things that we do right now. Well, Docker turned 6 years old this week, or this month, and Mike Vizard, again, one of our, you know, staff writers here who covers a lot for us. Mike did a great job covering the birthday celebration. Look, Docker in 6 years, 85 million downloads and still going strong. So happy birthday to Docker, and go read Mike's article for a good look back on the past 6 years. Next article I wanted to bring to your attention was a new project being launched at the folks at Red Hat, soon to be IBM Red Hat. And they've announced a project called Quarkus, which will allow us to do Java on Kubernetes, right? Well, the whole premise of Java was write once, run everywhere. But, you know, it wasn't always that way on Kubernetes. So how could you do Java on Kubernetes? Well, Red Hat has launched Quarkus project to make it easier. They're coming out with an optimized framework to run on Kubernetes. So once again, you know, Red Hat understands open source. We all know that. Kudos to the Red Hat team for leading the charge here with this Quarkus project, making it easier to run Java on the Kube platforms is going to be a huge boon, because there's so much. Look, there's just a ton of Java apps and Java components out there, and so this is exactly what we need. It makes it easier to use Kubernetes, right? If you already have your Java stuff, it's easier to use. Because Kubernetes is still hard. And it's not just Kubernetes, right? Remember, Kubernetes is only out a year or so in official release. But I remember going to DockerCon 3-4 years ago and thinking to myself, this has got to be easier. There's got to be an easier way. You know, it's a fantastic. Containers and Kubernetes and this whole microservices thing is an amazing new way of deploying software and putting it out there. But no one ever said it was easy. And anything we can do that makes it easier for developers and DevOps and ops folks to deploy this is a fantastic thing. So kudos to Red Hat. We'll move on from there. The next thing I wanted to bring out was Containerd. So for those who don't know, a lot of the basic Docker container functionality, Containerd, was given over to the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. And in this article, again by another article by Mike Vizard, Containerd has become the 5th project from CNCF, Cloud Native Computing, to graduate out of it. So it's a standalone project now, no longer being fostered or incubated by CNCF. And if you've used Docker or you downloaded a container, I've seen numbers, something like 85 to 90% of all the containers out there are using Docker or Containerd. So it is the standard. But more importantly, the fact that it graduated out of CNCF, that it has this, it is the standard. There's a real community behind all of this. They're not just tied to any one vendor, right? Going back to the DevOps story about CD Foundation, I think one of the reasons we're seeing those projects being given to the CD Foundation and Linux Foundation is you don't want these projects tied to one vendor, so you're not locked in, and no one wants to do anything else because it's for the benefit of the one vendor. Containerd is a great example of how the whole industry now rallies around that. So happy graduation, Containerd. Glad to have you. Last article I want to talk about for Container Journal this week was a two-part article, actually, that came from Igor Lifshitz. It's a year of Kubernetes. There's two of them that he has out there. The one I'm going to highlight today is called Navigating Treacherous Waters. And, you know, in this series, look, Igor has immersed himself in Kubernetes for the last year, right? He's a cybersecurity expert, contributes to Container Journal. In this article, he really marvels at the size and growth of the Kube community, as do I, and as do many of us out there. It's such a dynamic, fast-growing community. But Igor, like I said before, in discussing another article, you know, writes that despite the great progress and the great job that CNCF has been doing, Kubernetes still hasn't crossed the chasm, right? 8,000 people in Seattle in November were all jazzed up about it. But there's a bigger world out there, and that world still hasn't caught on necessarily to Kubernetes. And if they have, they're still struggling because it's harder, or it's too hard still. It needs to be easier. It needs to mature. But, you know, sometimes there's no recipe for maturation other than time. And so we need time for Kubernetes and these similar kinds of technologies to mature and age so that they are easier, that they do have a wider base of support. Many orgs, as a result of this, are opting to outsource their Kubernetes management. And maybe that is the way it'll go. Maybe only the largest companies who have enough expertise in-house will manage their own Kubernetes, and others will outsource it. I don't know. Time will tell. But, you know, don't fall into the trap of disillusionment with Kubernetes. The best is yet to come. And I think that's the message from Igor, and that's certainly the message from us at Container Journal. So if you're interested, though, in Kubernetes and Docker and these kinds of serverless, do check out Container Journal. Be sure to subscribe to our newsletter to stay up to date on all of this. If you're going to Cube World, come check us out there. So at this point, then, let's go back now to a final word from our sponsors, and we'll be back to wrap up our show.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
All right, thanks for that word from our sponsors. Alan Schimmel, this week at MediaOps, back here in Boca for our initial program. I hope you've enjoyed it. We covered a whole bunch of stuff. In future episodes, though, I really hope to have some nice guests that we can talk with. We'll be doing some other interesting things. Want to talk more about Digital Anarchist in the future and DevOps chats and stuff like that. But how much can you put into one show? So we're going to wrap this first edition of This Week at MediaOps. Hope you enjoyed the show. Be sure to check out Digital Anarchist, our video platform where this show will live. And also check out DevOps TV, our YouTube channel, our DevOps chats, as I mentioned, on SoundCloud, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcasts. And, you know, the rest of our shows that we've highlighted here. We'll do another This Week at MediaOps next week. But until then, stay secure, good developing, whether it be with DevOps or Agile or Cube or any other technology you're using. This is Alan Schimmel from MediaOps. Have a great week, everyone.